Welcome back. For our top domestic story this hour, let's follow up on a topic we discussed just a few weeks ago here on In Question: sexual violence in the U.S. military. We recently broke down data from a Rand Corporation study which found that sexual assault is rampant in the military, specifically the Navy. Rand found that 10% of women surveyed for that study were violated at least one of the Navy's installations deemed to be high risk for assault. That was documented in a survey of 170,000 U.S. service members. This week, 2 cases emerged which illustrate just how dangerous the Navy can be, though this time not for women sailors, but rather young girls who live near bases. First, in Bahrain, Quarterman 3rd Class Kenneth Olaya is charged with trying to commit a sexual act with a child. He's also accused of soliciting sex in exchange for money on multiple occasions. The crimes are alleged to have taken place between March 2017 and January of this year. He's charged with soliciting a child between the ages of 12 and 16. Olaya is just one of 5 American sailors currently facing sexual crime charges in Bahrain alone. Perhaps even more disturbing, though, is a case in Washington state where 4 sailors are filming themselves having group sex with a minor. The incident is alleged to have taken place in the barracks of Navy base Kitsap Bangor back in September of 2017. The Navy has not released the names of the men in question. Commander Corey Baker of the Submarine Force U.S. Pacific Fleet did remark on the charges, however, saying, quote, "No allegation of rape or use of force in the incident was made," adding the Navy takes allegations of misconduct seriously, and upon learning of this, immediately initiated a criminal investigation into the matter. With sexual assault in the military in question, earlier I spoke with U.S. Army veteran and host of the Eyes Left podcast, Mike Prysner. Mike, I'm not sure how no force could have been alleged in that case, considering the girl in question was between the ages of 13 and 16 years old. But do you have confidence that any of these men will be properly held accountable?
Well, I think that they'll be held accountable in some way, especially because it's a big, news story. It's a scandal for the commanders. And because these are lower enlisted people that, there's a high likelihood that they will be brought to, military trial, court-martialed, and punished. But many people may not know that, in the military justice system is different from our justice system, where it's really the discretion and the decision of a commander what legal action will be taken. There's no district attorney. There's no prosecutor that brings charges. It's up to the actual commander. So the commander that made these really offensive statements about, the no force used in this crime, can we really trust this person to make the decision about what kind of charges will be brought and what kind of punishment is going to be handed down? And of course, there's many cases where, higher-ranking people, officers, commit these types of crimes, and because they're in the same club and friends with the commander, they're held with impunity for some of these things. And so that's a real problem with how charges are brought. But also, we're just talking about, will people be held accountable within the U.S. justice system or the military justice system? But when it comes to crimes committed in other countries, in the instance in Bahrain, there's no accountability to the actual population, to the people that are being occupied or where the base is. There is actually no rights whatsoever of the host nation to bring charges against a soldier that's violated a crime in their country against one of their people.
That's a really key point. But I wanted to ask you what it is about the military that you think breeds this epidemic of sexual assault. As someone who went through the recruiting and training process, what about that journey makes people more prone to committing these acts of sexual violence?
Sure. Well, I think in U.S. society in general, violence against women, crimes against women, sexual assault is a rampant epidemic in U.S. society in general. A society based on patriarchy and misogyny. So these are phenomena that we see in U.S. society as a whole, but of course in the military, things are highly exaggerated. It's a hyper-masculinity. It's a majority male culture and this kind of very, frat boy type culture. And so all of the problems that we see in general society are seen in an exaggerated way within the military. And so there's all kinds of reasons for that. I mean, just the idea of the military being a dominant force, dominating other countries, dominating other people. Of course, if you're impressing that on people, then the individuals are going to feel they can dominate other human beings, other people's bodies, and things like that. But this is a rampant problem in the military, and in particular against soldiers themselves, against women in the military themselves. I mean, there's a really insane rate of sexual assault for U.S. service members. It's estimated that about 1 in 4 women report being sexually assaulted in the military, which is an exorbitant amount. And in fact, last year, there was the highest number of reports of sexual assault by women in the military by fellow soldiers and by commanders, people who outrank them. And of course, the Pentagon has tried to spin this, bombshell story as that there's just more confidence in the system to bring forward allegations of sexual assault. I mean, obviously, it's a consequence of the Me Too movement and the inspiration of people to finally come forward. But one of the things that's hidden in that report that showed there's a record number of sexual assaults reported, that around 60% of women who report sexual assault also report being retaliated against for reporting their assault. And so they face all sorts of punishment, ruins their careers, they're slandered. And so there's this really, they're de-incentivized to report these things because the majority of people who report sexual assault are themselves punished and humiliated for bringing those charges forward.
And finally, just really briefly, Mike, it's not just sexual violence that comes out of these U.S. bases, especially the ones in other countries. Do you think their presence helps or hurts the U.S. image abroad?
Well, it obviously hurts it. I mean, that's why there's massive movements in every country where there's a U.S. military base against the military base, from Japan to Korea to Italy, throughout Europe, throughout Asia. Anywhere you have a major military presence, you, of course, have all of these problems that arise from it, from violence, sexual violence, to just accidents from using the country as a testing ground. And there are massive movements of the local populations to try to remove those bases. And that's something that should be respected by any service member who respects the people of the country they're told they're supposed to be helping. They should respect the sovereignty of those nations, and these nations want the people out. I mean, it's funny because it's such a massive problem, that in last year, the U.S. military in Japan and Okinawa, where there's large numbers of these types of problems, they actually, a general had to make it illegal for U.S. soldiers to drink alcohol in all of Japan as a way to try to, because there are so many alcohol-related crimes, as a way to try to, stop these problems from happening. So it really speaks to how widespread these problems are. And so again, it comes back to this issue of impunity, where there's no accountability. The host country, the local population, if they're affected, there's nothing that they can do to hold people accountable who make crimes against them. I mean, to the point where Bush, the Bush administration signed into law this Hague Invasion Act, where any country that tries to bring war crimes charges or charges in the ICC against any service member, the U.S. actually has the right to invade and militarily attack that country trying to bring charges against a single U.S. soldier. So it just speaks to really the level of the problem and the lengths that the U.S. is willing to go to protect impunity for soldiers.
Yeah, very absurd lengths you've just described there. We're going to have to leave it there for now. Mike Prysner, U.S. Army veteran, and he's co-host of the Eyes Left podcast, so be sure to check that out as well. Thanks, Mike.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.